Fortress on a Hill with Henry, Danny, Keagan, Jovanni, Shiloh, and Manisha.
Welcome, everybody, to a mini episode on Fortress on a Hill. I'm doing a podcast episode for one of my writing classes. And I wanted to talk to Jovanni, our co-host, about the anti-war veteran community today and what his thoughts are on what's going on and just kind of talk about the community a little bit. So, hey, Jovanni, how you doing?
Doing well. How you doing, Keagan?
I'm good. I'm really good. So I just wanted to ask you, where do you think that since you worked in About Face and you have a little more like knowledge, I guess, about the movement, I just wanted to ask your thoughts on where do you think things are today? Like how many do you think that there are approximately veterans who would identify as anti-war?
So when I was in the About Face, there were so I was in the About Face for about 6 years. I was the new member coordinator. I was in staff for about 6 years, and also so I coordinated with new members, and I plugged in new members to try to different other older members in the area or more experienced members in the area. I said, all right. When I first started working, I think I started working in 2015 on the staff. And according to our books and numbers, there were roughly about 4,000 people, 4,000 people that were registered as members, right? However, not all of them were active. I mean, out of the 4,000, just a percentage were active. Then we did a cleanup of, we sent out messages, just people reply back to see how many people were still interested. And, and being active in the org, or, we came down to, I think it was 2,000 or 2,000. There were like, roughly about 500 or something dues period, people that constantly pay their dues once.
But yeah. Thanks. The 4,000, that's more than I thought. 4,000 is not a bad number.
Yeah. Yeah. But I said, when we came down, when we started, sending emails and, phone banking as people reply, whatnot, how many people were still interested, it came down to like about 2,000 people that still wanted to connect it and still wanted to be, receive our, their emails and be some form of shape, be, connected to the org. But when it came down to whether we're active, it was less. It was somewhere about 500 or so people that were still doing active and people that were still paying members.
Nice. What would you say were the main ways that you guys would communicate? Like, how would you communicate mostly and organize and stuff?
Oh, so we communicated with email, social media. I know that when I was leaving, we started adopting text banking, texting people. Yes, those are the forms of, and just good old fashioned phone call. Particularly people that are more active, they'll get, like, for example, when I was a new member coordinator, right? That was my thing, was to actually, as people join, they'll get a phone call from me. They'll get a phone call within a week or so, and an email, instantly telling them that we received their application, etc. And then they'll follow up with the phone call. And we're followed up with a new members coordinating a new members welcome call. I'll give them the history of the org, some of the bylaws, some of the culture of the org, and some of the actions that I've done in the past, and then just ways to get plugged in, ways to be active, whatnot. Those new members orientation. But yeah, so that was the main way of connecting with people, and I'll probably connect with other members around the area, and hopefully they will continue with getting plugged in and doing things together. Also have a new members leadership class that I will give people that wanted to be new members, coordinators or leadership regional area, so in the state and whatnot. They came in and pretty much equip them and train them and how to keep people, ways to keep people active and ways to do different campaigns and do different things, how to start a campaign in a little campaign in the area, and how just pretty much get people active. Because the thing is that, you join an organization, you join the about face movement because something shook you, right? Something shook you and you wanted to do something about it and you find an organization, that's what you join, right? However, it's easy to, because at the moment you're hot, at the moment you want to do something, but it's easy to cool down and just keep it in your back mind. So, because, particularly if you join an organization that's not really doing anything. So I was trying to get people active in their area, try people involved in their area. And if there wasn't anyone active in their area, I was trying to equip working members in how to be active in their area, how to plug their ears to the ground, how to get connected with the other orgs around the local area and just build something.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Um, I wanted to switch gears a little bit, just because I found some really interesting studies on masculinity in the military and masculinity and the military, as in, talking about the ideas that we talk that like the military espouses, or, being a soldier or like being in the military is seen as like a very masculine thing to do because you get to be a part of war, which is obviously like the most masculine, quote unquote, thing that you can be a part of. And it was interesting because I found this study that talked about it specifically in anti-war veterans, the idea of masculinity. And so they kind of go through these different um, modes of identity that people have. There's the personal identity, there's the collective identity, I'm a part of a group. There is the US identity, like I'm an American. And then there's the military identity, I am a part of this branch. And so the idea is that there's this idea of military masculinity, and because it's a strong connection between war and masculinity. And uh, in this paper, they say military masculinity is one privileged form of masculinity in the USA and many Western societies, and thus a type of hegemonic masculinity. Military masculinity includes a set of beliefs, practices, and attributes that can enable individuals, men and women, to claim authority on the basis of affirmative relationships with the military or military ideas. And military masculinity has these sets of ideas that you get to be a part of that reinforce that idea of what a man is. And so when you're changing your mindset from I am very pro-war to now I am not, there can be a shift in yourself about what masculinity means to you because you're not identifying with those same parts anymore.
Yeah, keep in mind that most people that when they join the military young, they still find themselves transitioning from adolescent to adulthood, right? And then there's certain expectations of you. And it could be very scary for people that graduate high school to really have an idea what to do next. Some people have their life lined up for them, for college, blah, blah, this and that. And, my parents, my father owned this business and I'm work with my father and I own that business. So people have their lives lined up for them, but some people don't. Some people still trying to find, where they fit in, particularly in the society that we live in. We live in a very hyper individualistic society, a very liberal society in that sense that where the most important atom, the most important being is the self, right? That's what classical liberalism is, right? But that goes really against human nature, because we are as animals, we're a collective, right? We've always been collective since a species, since since we came out, right? We've always roam in small families and bands, and from bands to class to tribes, to nation, right? Our society is very individualistic in the sense that it's easy to be lost. It's easy to feel lost. It's easy to not feel being a part of a larger group is kind of like calling. That's why people when they go to college, they join fraternities or sororities, right? Being part of a group.
Yeah. So socialization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Community networking.
Yeah.
All
So
those things that we could do this.
that is the condition. That is a something that's very innate, ingrained, and hardwired. And the culture we live in, a very individualistic culture, is very contradicting how we are wired. So when you join the military and you join that bondsmanship, particularly like I spent a lot of time in infantry, right? And in combat arms. So that is very bonding. I remember seeing older NCOs, like they love going to the field because it gives them opportunity to get away from their family, so, it gives them a break from their family, right? And then that's same reason people go hunting, they go hunting with the guys, because they have that male bonding, right? So that's what the military represents to a lot of people. It reinforces that. But it also, depending on what kind of family you come from, it comes from a very conservative family, you come from a close knit family, where there's expectations of you as a young man. You're supposed to take care of your family. You're supposed to be a good citizen. You're supposed to take care of your community. You're supposed to be honest. You're supposed to be polite to your elders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have these expectations, right? Which the military kind of reinforces, and people that want to know if I'm getting off track of what you're trying to say, but that's one of the things that it that's one of the attractions that brings people to to attract towards this institution or this society, because it's very close. It's a close knit society, because it's a microcosm in a way as well of the larger society. With the hierarchy, there's clear lines. There's kind of an expectation of you. You know what you're going to do the next day. We function better when there's structures than when there's chaos. So there's one thing that I remember saying, that people like to be told what to do. And what I mean is that there's a chaotic situation. Let's say there is a fire in a building. People are looking for, there's two ways to react to it, right? There's a fire in a building, people just running all over the place, just running, trampling over each other, right? Or there's just one person who take lead, right? And tell people, all right, guys, just line up. Let's go down the fire stairs and we'll meet outside in the parking lot, right? And then people just rally up and we just line up and then go down the stairs and they're in the park and they'll find and they'll rally up in the parking lot, right? So there's two ways of seeing things, right? So most people respond to that type of to a type of leadership, particularly when a moment of chaos. And that's one of the things that people find, that structure that people find attractive to the military. Now, remember what I said earlier, that you grew up with certain values. You don't steal, you don't cheat, you don't lie. Particularly if you come from a family that hold those values, conservative families that hold those values, or whatnot. Then you find yourself that you participated in an action, and then you find yourself that you were lied to, that you were cheated, you were lied to. And that becomes a shock to the conscience of the person, right? Then people in the military are found with, particularly I'm thinking about this war, it's still called global war on terror, right? Which didn't make any sense to me, didn't make any sense from the beginning. Terrorism is a military tactic. How can you wage war in a military tactic? But yeah, when people find themselves in a situation when they feel that they were lied to, feel that they were taken advantage of, they feel that their innocence was taken away, they feel that they have certain sets of beliefs, that you're joining this institution because X, Y, and Z, but now you find yourself that you were just a tool. That could be a crash to reality of people. And there's two ways to deal with it. There's two ways that I've seen people deal with it. Is they suppress it, or they'll continue on with their careers. They retire and say they don't even think about it, right? And there's people that dwell on it, and there's people that is just too much severe, and they just end up leaving the military, right? Particularly, I'm talking about the community of the anti-war. You still long for that sense of community. You just can't deal with the contradictions of the military, the destructiveness, the dehumanization of others. And then within the military, you see that as well, because now I was talking to one of my friends, and he was a little member, a face member, and he was a paratrooper. And we were talking to some civilians about the structure and the internal structure of the military. This kid that was thinking about joining the military. We were tabling at the university. And then what he was saying is that he was a paratrooper, he was a 82nd Airborne. So when we join the military, right, now you are part of this organization. You wear your uniform. Uniform represents authority. Sharpness represents some type of structure, some type of discipline, uniformity, right? But that's what the uniform represents. When you have that, you feel yourself, you're a higher caste of society. Now you see civilians as kind of as children, they don't know any better, they're innocent, blah, 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 right? And you're the protector, and now you wear the uniform, and you're kind of above, right? You're the super student now. But then within the military, you see the same thing because they replicate the same thing in the military because now you're in combat arms in the infantry. The infantry see the rest of the people that are not in those combat arms as beneath them, as weaker than them, beneath them. Because I'm an infantryman, right? I was a medic in the infantry, and the medic, you have to kind of prove yourself to the infantry guys that you can do the same thing and better than them because not only you're carrying the amount of equipment that they're carrying, right? So you're participating in the road marches, you're pulling guard duty with them. And the other things you got to try to prove yourself so you get your respect from them because if not, they'll see you as beneath them because you're a medic and they're infantry. So then you have that cast within the military, right? You know, I'm an infantryman, and you know, a pencil pusher in the office, right? He's beneath me, right? Then within that structure, right? Then you have the Rangers, right? For example, the paratroopers, right? They're kind of the elite and an elite force within the combat arms unit, right? So they see everybody else as a leg or pole. They don't know any better because I'm a Ranger, I'm a paratrooper, etc. I'm a jump master, etc. Right? Then you have the special forces community, which is a little bit different. It's interesting because I work with both. I work with the Rangers and the special forces community. Rangers tend to be more, you tell them walk through the wall, they'll walk through the wall and ask no questions, right? The bone just keep pounding against the wall, keep pounding against the wall, keep pounding against the wall. They ask no questions, right? I remember a friend, he was a special forces guy. He was telling us different, right? And said, you know, you tell a Ranger to cut the grass with scissors, he'll go out there and cut the grass with scissors, right? And he would make fun of that because it was in the office and there was a Ranger guy in the office. He was make fun of him all the time. And he was special forces guy. Just was a little bit more lax, the uniform a little bit looked like it come down of a duffel bag, let the hair grow a little bit more, you know, this and that. But they have a different focus, different mission though. They see everybody else as kind of beneath them because they're an elite force. So you see all those structural hierarchies in the military.
That's helpful because, yeah, you're talking about hierarchies and you're talking about the structure that you involve yourself in and the like different compromises you have to make for yourself, basically. And so, you know, when you're getting out, then you have the time to reflect on everything that you did. You have time to reflect on your feelings about it. And for me, I felt really like I didn't come into the military being like super gung ho, like hell yeah, America. I was very like, I understood that we'd done some stuff that wasn't great, but like for me, it was because I wanted the GI Bill and I wanted the benefits of going back to college and stuff. I read another article in a paper talking about identity and veterans and specifically what happens when you're getting out and the process of reintegration, what that looks like and how the ways that your identity shifts over the reintegration period can lead to and other symptoms. So in this paper, they talked about reintegration. And so they said the process of reintegration to civilian life has been conceptualized as an abrupt culture shock that involves loss, maintenance, gains, and transformation of existing identity structure. Given this context, the social identity model of identity change may serve as a useful framework for viewing these changes. So basically, like it's a shock to your system because you're losing that identity, you're losing that brotherhood, that camaraderie, that identity that you had, and you're turning into whoever this person is. And for me, I thought, oh, I can just go back to being the person I was. And like, you can, but it's different. I mean, everything is like, you're a different person. You can't go back to being that like wide-eyed, naive person that didn't understand all of what was going on. So, and then they say, as such, a successful transition to civilian life requires a transformational change in one's military identity and maintenance of existing identity structures. So, yeah, obviously you have to rethink everything that you did and why. What do you feel like was
what you did or what you saw, conversation you were a part of, you know, what you seen other people do, and etc. One thing of the military is that you always keep hearing is that you're in the Navy, right? The Navy was, I think the Navy is a different culture than the Army, but probably the same. That, you know, you keep hearing that with rank comes privilege. So I spent 12 years active duty and 2 years reserves, right? So making that transition, the reason I went from active duty to reserve is to help me in that transition as a move, right? And because to make sure that's what I was going to do. And also because it was, like I say, it was in the shock. They also offer some type of bonus, whatever. I forgot. Yeah, and those are some bonuses to make the transition from active duty to reserves, etc. Um, and also in the military, I already had children, wife married at home. But with rank comes privilege, and life in the military is not really hard, particularly when you start moving in ranks and stuff like that. Your your training is paid for. You supply for qualified. You go to that school, and this training is paid for. We'll go TY. I forgot how the Navy calls it. When you're up in the higher echelons, you go TY and they get paid to these business trips and all that. Particularly when you start going into those higher ranks, I'm talking about enlisted here. You start becoming A7, a chief, what you guys call a chief. Um,
Hmm.
start going to the E8 rank, to E9 rank. You guys call it your senior, right? You guys call it the E9
E9 is master.
master chief, right? We guys,
So,
we start, those are very high privileged positions. And then when they leave the military, when they retire, it's like an emptiness, particularly when you're used to running things, when you have people working for you. Uh, if you move from different positions, people like they move different positions. You don't really have to interview for those positions. You got to check your list of records, what you've done in the past. You have to select to this school, to that school, and then they have this other position. That atmosphere doesn't really exist in the civilian world for most people, right? So for most people, when they make that transition, when you have people work under you, for example, I was a section chief when I was in the military. I had like 36 people working for me at one point, and that a lot of people that doesn't transition into the civilian world, so they feel lost. I don't know if you heard of the stories about, old Master Chiefs, right? Retired, they go to the BX or the PX just to look at soldiers, just to reminisce, right? Because they can't really adjust to the civilian world. That's the thing. I find that people that left the military and, minus if they didn't take part of war combat, they left the military, they did like 2 years or 3 years, 4 years, they got out. I find that they had an easier time to transition to civilian than people that did over 10 years and then got out. You kind of become institutionalized, in a sense. And
absolutely.
you see how the civilian world doesn't work that way. So you see a lot of people that spend a lot of time in the military. When they retire, when they get out, they look for other jobs that similar structures. They join the police department, they join border patrol, they join security firms or whatever. This night they try to find the same kind of structures, fire department, same kind of structures that they have in the military. That's what I find. I mean, I said minus people that went to combat war, participate in deployment. They have it's a different dynamic. And now you're adding other stressors on top of it. You adding PTSD, you adding moral injury to it, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, thank you so much for talking to me today. It was nice to get a little more insight into the community and just, your own personal experience of how you felt. And that would be, thanks so much for talking with me today.
Money is tight these days for everyone. Penny pinching to make it through the month often doesn't give people the funds to contribute to a creator they support. So we consider it the highest honor that folks help us fund the podcast in any dollar amount they're able. Patreons is the main place to do that. In addition, any support we receive makes sure we can continue to provide our main epistos free for everyone. And for supporters who can donate $10 a month or more, they will be listed right here as an honorary producer, like these fine folks. Fahim's Everyone Dream, Eric Phillips, Paul Appel, Julie Dupree, Thomas Benson, Janet Hansen, Ren Jacob, Scott Spalding, Spooky Tooth, Helgeberg, and Howard Reynolds. However, if Patreon isn't your style, you can contribute directly through PayPal at paypal.me/Fortress on a Hill. Or please check out our store on Spreadshirt for some great Fortress merch. We're on Twitter and Facebook.com/Fortress on a Hill. You can find our full collection of episodes at www.fortressonahill.com. Skepticism is one's best armor. Never forget it. We'll see you next time.
Come on, you good people, and listen to my song. I hope you'll pay attention. I will not detain you long.
www